All right. It is just the Mats here today. As you guys can see on Twitch and YouTube, we are live. We are part of the Drive In Podcast Network. I keep forgetting to say that all the time at the beginning, so I did not forget to say that this time. We are proud to be part of that network. It's been a lot of fun so far, and I can't wait to see where it goes. This for those of you watching live will drop on the podcast audience in about a week. I will be on vacation, so we are going to do a couple episodes on Fridays here to make up for the podcasting audience. So if you guys are listening to this on a podcast and you see the video for the AFC East on YouTube, that is because we are technically doing this early. So Matt, how you doing today on this beautiful Friday?
Doing all right. They said today is supposed to be the hottest day. I've been watching because I know you're about to come here and you were looking for some sweet relief. Right now, it only is forecasting out to next Friday, where it says it's supposed to drop down to 91. I'm hoping we go back into the 80s and get some storms. We pulled a Texas last night and had a low level moisture come in, so it was the dew point was like 70 degrees this morning, which for Colorado is ridiculous. It felt like I was swimming through the air, and it was like 75 when I first woke up this morning, and I thought this will not be spectacular.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to next week at all. I believe the low for next week in Texas is like 101, like every day. So I was like, yeah, like we talked about, I was
Yeah,
really hoping to go up there to like at least like 80 something Colorado weather. Like I was hoping for something, but I'm
yeah.
sure it's just with the lack of humidity you guys have up there, it'll still feel at least a little bit better than it does down here in Texas. So I am definitely looking forward to it for sure. So as I mentioned at the top there, we're going to be doing the AFC East. This is the beginning of it. So we're going to do the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Since it is just the two of us, I imagine we'll be able to get through this pretty quickly. So we'll kick it off with the New England Patriots. They finished 12-4 last year. Obviously lost to the Tennessee Titans in the playoffs, as we all kind of. I think a lot of people were probably predicting it. I know I thought that they would lose to Tennessee. It seemed like it was kind of the popular thing to do. But most overall touchdowns in 2020. So I put overall because obviously Cam Newton does have that
Rushing.
rushing upside. So more touchdown in 2020, Cam Newton or Tom Brady?
I'm going to go with Tom Brady. This isn't totally just a knock on Cam. I think we've discussed before, Tom Brady wasn't the only problem with the New England offense last year. One of the reasons people thought Tennessee was going to win is defensively, the Patriots were really good throughout the season. Offensively, it was a struggle. A lot of questions about skill position players, a lot of questions on the offensive line. I'm not sure they totally answered all of those things. I mean, the fact that we're having trouble finding a decent spot to put James White and Sonny Michel, we even talked about receivers. They have Mohamed Sanu. They have Edelman. We don't know if N'Keal Harry's ever going to show anything. Tight end, a total question mark. There are plenty of question marks. New England could still have a good season and win a lot of games like 17-14 or 14-10 if they can get that defense going. I think with the weapons in Tampa Bay, it's not inconceivable to think, even if Brady is a step back from what they got with Winston last year, it's still going to be better situation. I mean, he's got Evans, Godwin, Ronald Jones, who apparently I was the highest on of all the people in the Scott Fish Bowl.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about taking him right or what. So what round did you take him in? Just to jump off
I
subject.
took him at 6:04, and our friend Tony pulled up the Scott Fish Bowl stats, and apparently there I am. But see, I think that kind of tells you there's a lot of differences in that league in the way leagues draft. My league, it seemed like they were just hammering running backs. So by the time I went for Ronald Jones, he was the 27th or 28th running back off the board in our draft. It just was at 6:04.
Yeah. I think he went in like the 9th or 10th round in ours. As a matter of fact, Keyshawn Vaughn is still on the board, and I'm debating on taking him because I need some more running back help. But
Yeah.
for the most part, agree with you. I do think Tom Brady is likely going to have a few more, just because as we're going to get into here. I mean, my God, New England, how they won 12 games last year with me looking at the roster they have is kind of just I think a testament to how good Brady
Well,
is at managing that offense, and Bill is with that defense. It's like,
literally last year mid-year, my mid-year fantasy MVP was the New England Patriots defense, and a lot of people thought I was being funny or whatever, but that New England Patriots defense was scoring their points, was destroying people. They were scoring at the rate you were getting from some quarterbacks those first 8 games, and it was really kind of the fall off of the defense where you were like, oh, this team isn't very good.
yeah, well, and I would almost say, because I know we talked about it too. I think some of it had to do with the step up in competition they also played in the second half, because they did play a lot of really bad opponents early on in the season. But yeah, it was definitely that defense that carried them early on. It was kind of if you went up against the New England Patriots defense in fantasy, probably those first, as you mentioned, 7 to 8 weeks, you were kind of pissed off because they were scoring. Yeah. I want to say it was like upwards of 20 points every single week. Like they were.
Yeah, there was. People. I think there was one game where they got into the 40s because they scored like 2 or 3 touchdowns. It was unbelievable. They were outscoring running backs and everything. But see, that's the thing. That's the other thing that kind of makes me a little nervous when you talk about New England going into this season. They lost a lot of top defensive pieces that kind of went out in free agency too. So if their defense is a little less good, do they end up having to throw more? Does Cam, if Cam's back to his 2015 like physical form, he could be scary. I just don't think they're as good a team.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I thought this will be. I do think it'll be close. I don't think it's going to be something where Brady, blows out Cam by like 15 to 20 touchdowns. Because one thing, and we'll get into it too later, is I actually think you've obviously seen McDaniels up close with what he does calling offense and everything when he was there in Denver. I know you're not a fan of. Trust me, neither am I. I was happy that the Browns did not get him, as many of you know when we were going over that on the podcast. But he does seem to be able to tailor offenses very well to these guys. I mean, he made Jacoby Brissett the reason teams wanted to trade for him. He made Tim Tebow look like a serviceable quarterback at times. Like, he knows how to get a quarterback out and run, and I think it's fair to say Cam Newton's better than both of those. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the new additions they made this offseason, Cam Newton, Marquise Lee, Damiere Byrd, which I actually think he was on the team last year, if I'm remembering correctly now.
No, didn't he come from Arizona?
Maybe. I know he signed a 1-year contract. Like, I was looking at that.
I'm gonna look. I think he was with Arizona.
But then they drafted 2 tight ends in the draft, Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene. They lost Philip Dorsett. They traded Gronk, and obviously Brady left in free agency. They're expiring contracts after this year: Sanu, White, Burkhead, Marquise Lee, and Cam Newton. I didn't put Newton on here for the fantasy finishes because he only played 2 games. He was ahead, I think it was 20 points. Like, it wasn't really worth putting him on here, so I just kind of left him off.
Damiere Byrd was with the Arizona last year.
Okay, gotcha. So James White, RB18, 200.2 points. Sony Michel, RB31, 152.6. Julian Edelman, wide receiver 7 with 256.3, and then Mohamed Sanu, wide receiver 58 with 124.1 points. Same reason why I left N'Keal Harry off as well. Same thing kind of with the he was hurt most of the year, did not play much, did have obviously a couple big games down the stretch.
Well, even Sanu's fantasy points are mostly from his time with Atlanta because he really bottomed out when he came to New England.
So as we were just talking about before I mentioned this, McDaniels, we've seen him design really good offenses for Brissett. I mean, I know I want to say it was the game against Houston in his first start where he ended up having like a 50-yard touchdown run for the Patriots, which obviously you never would have seen with Tom Brady behind center. But it's just McDaniels does a good job, I think, of tailoring offenses to what his players do. I think the one thing you can give McDaniels, while I think we both agree he was not a good head coach for Denver, he seems to be a very good offensive play caller. So do you think that works in Cam Newton's favor? Are you buying Cam Newton knowing that he is a better athlete than what Tebow and Brissett were when Daniels had them?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the team that won 10 games with Matt Castle. So, I think they're good at using the personnel they have and having a scheme that's going to work. Cam Newton, if he's healthy, is still kind of an elite guy, so I don't think that's too bad of a reach for them. I think we all think that that's probably a better move than going straight to Stidham, but you never know. They saw something they liked in him. They seemed pretty comfortable going in that direction up until a couple of weeks ago. So I think they're going to be competitive. Anyone that's just writing the Patriots off is making a mistake.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I do think they're going to find ways to use Cam's, running ability to their favor. Obviously, I mean, again, Bill is arguably the best coach in NFL history. I mean, he's in the discussion if you don't want to make him the best, and I do think McDaniels is going to help tailor that offense too. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't run as much because I do think there's almost kind of a direct correlation on why he's been injured as much as he has been the past couple of years with the way that he used to run the ball. But he's got a good enough arm, and he's got guys like White, Edelman there in the short area that we saw. Man, his name just jumped out of my head. Norv Turner, when Cam Newton's best year, accuracy-wise, was when Norv Turner was there in Carolina, and that's what they did. They did a lot of short passes to, I think it was like Olsen at the time, obviously, because he was having a great year as tight end, and CMC, and that's really kind of what vaulted Cam Newton into that MVP season, and they've got weapons around. Obviously, White is not CMC, but Edelman is a really good wide receiver, and White is good enough. I think that's what they're kind of going to aim Cam Newton for. And then obviously we saw the videos of N'Keal Harry and him working out already to kind of give him that big target deep.
Well, and you guys pointed out 2015 went to the Super Bowl MVP year. He did not have much around him.
Yeah.
I think Jericho Cotchery was one of his main receivers. They had Ted Ginn. Yeah, so I mean, this isn't the worst set of skill position players Cam has been paired with.
And I think it's fair to say they probably have I think back then Carolina did have a decent O-line. It kind of seemed to progress worse over the past couple of years. So, and I don't think we can say how good New England's line is going to be. Obviously, it wasn't good last year, but they did have the injuries and everything. So, getting some of those guys back, a lot of us thought they might move on from. I want to say it's Thuney. As everybody knows, bad at saying names, but he's obviously looks like he's going to be with the Patriots for this year. So they've got an upgrade with the offensive. I don't remember who it was that got hurt last year, but he's coming back. So they've got a decent looking offensive line, at least right now, assuming health.
Yeah.
White, Michelle, Burkhead, and Damian Harris. Who do you trust in 2020? Because, I mean, obviously I think the easy answer is White just because he's the one that brings you that PPR value. But I do think that they're still going to rely heavily on the run, and there's just so much here. Is there anyone that you can really buy into as a solid fantasy asset?
I don't know. It surprises me when we were talking about positional finishes. For as bad as Sony Michel looked at times last year, finishing as RB31 kind of makes me wonder a little bit. We think there's a possibility they're going to be a little bit more of a power running team if Cam ends up using his legs a little bit more, or even just being kind of that running type quarterback. We've seen that be a boost to running backs as well. I still like White. I think whenever you write him off, he's going to end up kind of somewhere in that middle to low end RB2 range for PPR for what he's able to do. But Michelle is the question. Is he not that good? Was it the offensive line? Was it the offensive scheme? I think we still don't know because we kept waiting last year for that moment where we assumed he was going to turn it on and just be the banger that we saw at the end of 2018. It never really happened, but he didn't have a terrible season. And he got quite a bit of volume. I've seen a lot of comparisons recently to the season David Montgomery has. And, I don't think any of us was ready to write off Montgomery. We actually think, with a little better efficiency on their offense, he could move into the RB2 category. It doesn't feel like we're making the same arguments for Michelle, and maybe we should be.
Yeah, I think it's just because Michelle looks so much worse. And I agree with you, though. And I think a lot of it, too, was you had a lot of people, myself, Dennis included, thought Sony Michel was in for a huge year last year. We thought they were really going to rely on him, run the ball a lot because of the lack of weapons on the outside for Brady. And it just didn't happen. And some of that I do think was obviously Michel suffered that injury early on in, I think it was either preseason or training camps. Yeah. Never really seemed to bounce back from that, as we just talked about. The offensive line issues, when you couple that all together, that's not going to be good. I mean, teams, I think they knew how to play the Patriots going into it because they were just in a way kind of limited with the weapons they had. I mean, we saw for the first time that I can really think of how frustrated Tom Brady was at times when they were trying to pass the ball, and it was just Edelman out there. And I mean, the fact that they gave up a second-round pick to get Sanu, I think showed that they really knew that their passing game was in trouble. So if us as fans noticed that, I'm sure defenses did. So that might have played into Michelle as well. But I agree with you. Like the fact that he still finished as a middle tier RB3, and that's not bad. Obviously, you likely in your dynasty drafts paid up for him. You paid a very high first round pick to get him when he came out. But the fact that he returned that kind of value, I'm kind of with you.
So it looks like their offensive line. I'm pulling up their thing. If they're all healthy, it looks like I think it was David Andrews that got injured. That was their center last year. But I remember him being guards. They have Shaq Mason and Joe Thuney. Looks like left tackle. I think it was Isaiah Wynn. They had taken a high draft pick. I believe he got injured.
Yes, he did
early last year and came back toward the end. That helped them a little bit. And then right tackle Marcus Cannon. So, if they can get guys to stay in, that doesn't seem.
No, that's a pretty good offensive line. I was going to say defensive line. That's a pretty good offensive line. Like I said, Thuney was kind of my one coming into the offseason because there was a lot of talk that they may move from him. The fact that they're keeping him, I think it does. It brings back that good offensive line. So the reason I'm kind of buying Sony, and there's another guy too that I'll get into, is because of just how cheap they are. And so we're obviously going to get into it with the over or unders as well, but an ADP of 98, he's the 33rd RB off the board. I mean, that's the 8th round. You're getting a guy who has easily mid to upper RB2 upside, and you're getting him in the 8th round as the 33rd running back. And the other guy that I'm really in on is Harris. We saw a couple flashes of him last year. I do think they would not have come up and grabbed him when they did if they didn't believe in him as well. And I do think that if Sony Michel doesn't perform, Damian Harris is the guy that they could lean on. Obviously, White's going to be the guy, especially PPR-wise. But Harris, I think, could get the ball. I'm almost kind of forgetting about Burkhead. I know he's going to come in. He's going to get that one or two games that just pisses you off if you own Michelle, White, or Harris, if Harris is the guy, because Burkhead's going to come in and vulture a couple touchdowns and everything. But I think for me, it's going to be White and Michelle, or if Michelle does falter, I think they will pivot to Harris, and it's going to be one of those two. And Harris, obviously, is a lot cheaper than every one of them because he just didn't do anything last year.
And so Michelle, he actually played in all 16 games last year. I think we think about him being banged up. He was probably joined that long Patriots collection of perennially questionable players. I think they made jokes. Aside from opening week, Brady was questionable pretty much every game his last 5 or 6 years there. Michelle got 247 carries, a slight increase from his rookie year where he had 209. 912 yards, only only 19 yards less than what he had as a rookie, and he got one more touchdown than his rookie year with 7. I think it's just the 3.7 yards per carry kind of came back, and that definitely could be a product of scheme and line. And like you said, when teams, I think you could say the same thing about Lindsey, where his yards per carry dropped off and he had more carries but slightly less yardage. When you don't have the passing offense that is going to force the defense to respect that, everybody's up playing the run too, and when your offensive line maybe isn't quite as it could be and everybody's up front, it's hard to get those yards and grind them out.
Yeah, and then I think that's what's going to be interesting this year, because I think the one wrinkle that's actually going to help out whoever the running back is going to be is Cam Newton, because now these defense have to respect him running the ball as well, even if he doesn't do it as much as like I just talked about. Like, all it takes is that one or two big runs, and you know that, okay, now we're going to have a linebacker or a cornerback, someone kind of watching to see if he's going to make that move, and then that immediately gives that advantage then to those running backs as well. And I think that's going to be a big thing for them moving forward. Obviously, we trust Edelman. I mean, he's perennial been a top 12 wide receiver. Seems to get disrespected a lot. Really got disrespected this year, as you guys will see. He actually just went in the 12th round of the Scott Fish Bowl in my league. I was trying to grab him, and he went the pick before me, which sucked. But he's obviously going to be good. But outside of him, do you trust any of these other wide receivers, tight ends, to kind of be anything fantasy relevant for 2020?
Well, I think tight end at this point, you kind of have to write it off. They drafted 2 or 3 guys at that position. Not sure who's going to emerge or what level they'd emerge. And beyond that, I think they have Matt Lacoste and not much else. So I'm not taking a Patriots tight end right now as anything more than a taxi squad wish dream. Receivers, I'm not in on Sanu. I think it was no great loss for the Falcons to let him go last year. I'm not sure he fit real well. I know there's been a lot of hype for him lately because we've seen him working out with Cam. The one that interests me is N'Keal Harry, and I'm not going to go as far as to say I trust him, but this was a guy that was taken with the 31st pick in the first round of the draft. Last year, people I took over an orphan team, orphan dynasty team this year, and I was looking to see why I didn't have a first round pick, and it's because the guy traded his 2021st and Cortland Sutton to get up to 103 to take N'Keal Harry last year. Yeah, that broke my heart for many reasons. Yeah, seeing that go out the door, but I didn't make that trade. I just had to live with it. But I mean, we forget the value, and I've been doing this series for Dynasty Nerds, looking at stock watch. Some of the 2019 rookies in different positions that had a lot of hype last year. That 1 year later, people have kind of given up on. And Harry did not have much of an impressive year last year. We thought he couldn't have a better opportunity to come in. Patriots going and getting a first round receiver. They must have seen something they liked. It was kind of a forgotten year. But I think all those potential things are still there for him. And now his ADP is like wide receiver 57 in PPR and 61. It's 58 in standard, 57 in PPR, according to Fantasy Pros right now. I think that's a potential value. With a quarterback with another year in the system, maybe he has a chance. So if you're talking about, am I trusting anyone to start? No, but I wasn't willing to give Harry away because I want to see what's potentially there, and if you can get him for cheap, that's a guy I'm taking a chance on because we're less than a year removed from a guy that had tons of hype going into the season for all these reasons that still exist.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody who's been on listening to the show since last year knows I was not a big N'Keal Harry guy. I like him. I've stated many times I think he's got definitely wide receiver 2 upside, and that immediately means that I hate him just because he was the first wide receiver off the board. Or he went to the Patriots with the 31st pick, and so he's got to be the truth. And I do think he's a really good wide receiver. I don't know how well he's going to fit in with Cam Newton. He's more of a guy, as someone who watched a lot of college tape on him. I'm not sure that Newton can do this very well. He's not a guy who's going to beat you down the field. He's someone who's more of the catch back shoulder fades, kind of go up and contest catches and everything. I'm not sure that plays into Newton's game much. The one thing I will say is he was impressive in those couple games though when he came back. I know he had one good touchdown. He got robbed of a touchdown last year as well. There was that one. I can't remember if it was in the end zone or he caught it on the sideline and then reached in and it was a touchdown and the referees called it a incomplete passing that he stepped out of bounds and the Patriots didn't have a challenge. And even I, someone who didn't like N'Keal Harry that much, was like, nah, that was a touchdown. Y'all screwed that kid.
Well, and he caught when he finally managed to get in toward the back half of the season, ended up catching 12 total for 105 and a couple of touchdowns. I can't remember what game. It might have been was it the Philly game?
I want to say it was, it may have been.
Dallas?
It was I don't think it was an afternoon game. Was there any late games that they played at the end of the season? I don't know because I was watching it and I don't typically watch Patriots games. So I want to say it was one of the only ones on TV at the time. But I don't know. I like that one. I know was a big game for them. They not necessarily needed to win it, but they were still in the hunt with Buffalo. I think at that point.
Maybe it was
and then when
Kansas City.
It may have been because I know all the N'Keal Harry truthers were kind of going crazy on Twitter.
Yeah, because they lost 16-23 to Kansas City. A touchdown would have made a big difference there.
And it was a big deal. So he looked good, and I'm with you. I think the sad thing is Edelman is still more of a steal based on ADPs right now than Harry is, and he's a more proven player.
Well, I would expect Edelman's ADP. I think Edelman's ADP fell into the toilet because people were not sold on the Jarrett Stidham, Brian Hoyer experience. I have seen his ticking up a little bit. Even doing these SFB drafts, you've seen people not afraid to come up and take him back where you figure he should go.
Yeah, and I think obviously to his age hurts him a little bit with dynasty drafts. Do you want to count on him much longer? I mean, Harry is he's a worthwhile investment where you can get him now. Last year in ADPs with any startups, I thought he was being way overdrafted because again, I get it. He's got the
draft. It's overdrafting rookie season every year.
Yeah, it's one of those things where. Again, people think like I'm trying to talk bad about this kid. I think he's got solid wide receiver to upside. That's not a bad thing. Not every wide receiver is going to be a top 12 wide receiver. We've got hundreds of wide receivers in the league, and only 12 of them can do it every single year. I just don't see that out of Harry. That's not a bad thing. To say he's got solid wide receiver to upside every year, I think is a compliment.
That would make him similar to Edelman. I don't think anybody's ever looked at Julian Edelman and said that dude's top 12 no matter what.
Yeah, well, I mean, Edelman proves it though every year, but I think a lot of that too is the PPR point of it, with he gets like 8 catches a game, especially when he was with Brady. Which that's where things will be interesting with Edelman, because I don't know if he gets that this year.
Well, and that's what. So to me, for Harry, if you're in a league, look for that owner that has essentially given up on him. If I can get him for a late, what I think is going to be a late second or a third round pick, I'm adding him to my bench. If I have him in the wide receiver 4, 5, 6 range, I'm adding him to my bench.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're trying to win it this year, because he could contribute this year. I mean, if you could, I just throwing this out there, I try and do a 2022 pick, because this 2021 class, I know I say it every year, is going to be loaded, but the one bad thing about this year is we don't even know what we're going to get college football. I'm so worried about what the future of everything's going to be right now. So,
well, it's really interesting. It seems like our best hope for fall production is that they're going to play intra-division, intra-conference games. But the real scary thing to me is if they push off to spring. I think a lot of the prospects we were expecting to see in the draft, I wouldn't play, because I don't know that you can play that season roll right into draft, right into an NFL offseason. I mean, you'd essentially be playing 2 seasons of football in a single year, 2 very competitive seasons of football in a single year. That's a tall ask.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm worried about. I've been paying attention a lot to, obviously being a Buckeyes fan, I pay a lot of attention to the Big Ten, and they've talked about how they were the first ones to come out and announce, hey, we're only doing conference games, so 10-game schedule. And a lot of that talk was what they were saying. Obviously, there's a lot of talk that Corona could spike back up in the fall time, and so they were talking about doing the division games or rival games right at the beginning of the season. And then it
would be so weird to see Ohio State, Michigan week 1.
I know, I would hate it, but I mean,
at least you get to see it.
Exactly, that's all I'd care about. But they're talking about trying to get as many games in before if there's a possible shutdown, and then saving the rest of the games for when spring started up and the playoffs. And that is where things would be interesting, right? Because I'm having a big talk with, again, I've mentioned it before. If you guys don't follow him, Ray Garvin at Ray GQ, he's a great college football mind. I'm in a couple chats with him, and we've been talking about it. And that's my thing is I don't know if a guy like Justin Fields is going to go back and play in the spring because of what you just mentioned. Like, not only just the
or Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne. I mean, Etienne almost came out into this draft. I bet he thinks about that decision a lot now. Yeah, but I mean, no, if you're and so there you have, if they do that, you would figure there's a lot of big time people that are the reason those teams got to the playoffs.
Yep.
That might be like, hey, we can't do this. Would that end up being one of the most garbage college football playoffs? Not to put demean anybody else, but you don't want to see a Super Bowl where both teams make it into the Super Bowl and lose 6 of their best players to injury or something along the way, and you're watching like Trevor Siemian against
Yeah.
whatever you can think of.
Yeah, I don't know. Nick Mullins, San Francisco makes
Taysom Hill and Nick Mullins out there, rolling. I mean, I'd be happy because I'm a
yeah.
Taysom Hill truther, but
No,
Jeff Driscoll and Nick Mullins out there playing for the Super Bowl.
that's what's going to be weird, and it's that's what we were talking about. Is like, so I don't know. It would depend on the teams, obviously, because if it were say, I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to remember who the four were last year, because man, I cannot remember.
Clemson, Ohio State,
the other
LSU, and Oklahoma.
So say it was the same four again. I would not be surprised if you see most of the LSU guys go back, because they don't have a lot of guys that are coming out this year. Jamar Chase probably wouldn't, their top wide receiver. But then, so you still got Miles Brennan, who he can come out this year, but he's not a household name. Not a lot of people are talking about him as a quarterback. So if he goes in and maybe shows, he's not going to have a Burrow type season, but if he continues and plays throughout the college playoffs, might improve his draft stock. Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma, he can't come out, so you might see a lot of those guys stay. But I would not be surprised at all, because it's not even just the
Clemson. Clemson is the one.
Trevor
you figure they're going to be a top contender. Well, isn't that where ATN is also?
Yes, yeah.
I thought he was
and you've got all their defensive players. Like, they've got a ton of players all together. So
but they're a perennial. Or if Alabama got in, Alabama's usually a team that has a lot of pro prospects, and isn't Waddle potentially coming
Waddle,
out?
Devonta Smith can come out. Mac Jones is their
Smith,
quarterback.
Matt Jones.
They've
So
got all defensive players. Yeah. Well, so that's my point. Is I feel like it's not even just that. Like you were just saying, moving into the season, my biggest thing would be just thinking of Jalen Smith for the Cowboys. Do you want to risk that serious injury right before your possible NFL draft? And the NFL has already come out and said they're not going to push the draft back. So there's no of them working with the NCAA in it. So it's going to be.
Well, that's the thing when they were talking about a spring season. If per se they're not willing to move the draft at all, the draft is typically the end of April. If you started a spring season in post, I would imagine if they're doing a spring season, they're starting it after the Super Bowl, which from a football fan enjoyment season, you could almost essentially have two seasons that you could just, we'd be headlong in every week's show would be a college football roundup, because it would be awesome from that standpoint. But if you're talking about like draft wise, so let's take the XFL as an example. The XFL was scheduled to have its championship game the Saturday or the Sunday. I think it was the Sunday of draft weekend. No, of draft weekend. It would have been the same. You would have had the NFL draft for 3 days and then XFL championship. Well, if you replace XFL with college football, I don't see how that works at all. And those guys are used to having gaps between the end of the regular season and doing those bowls where they can kind of recover and put their teams together. And in terms of the college football playoff, you're used to playing the first round and then having a few weeks in between. So if they didn't start till end of February, you could reasonably see going till May or something. I get the NFL not wanting to move. We could end up with 2 or 3. This is where my wife was like, well, is everything going to be back to normal for sports next year? No, I think this is a 2, 3, 4-year impact on professional college sports, just getting back into the rhythms and all these things. And that's what's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think the only way the spring way works, and we've obviously gone off on a huge tangent here, so I apologize about that. But the only way the spring thing works, I think, is if they're able to get – because most conferences, it's only going to be a 10-game schedule. So if they're able to, say, get 5 or 6 games in before a shutdown, and then they're only doing – 5 or 4 games in the spring, then the playoffs. And I would imagine if they're trying to get everything squeezed in, they won't do the layoff in between. The reason they do the layoff in between now is because they've got, those bowl games. I would imagine there wouldn't be any bowl games. It'd be like, all right, whatever top 4 teams you're going to the playoffs, this is what you're going to do. But still, like we just talked about, I don't see the Fields, Lawrence's, ETNs wanting to do that, because then you're not at the combine. You're not doing any workouts. You're going to be in your technical second half of your college football season. Does a national championship mean that much to you, or does that paycheck mean that much to you? And I can't fault them either way, because again, if you're playing actual games, well, yes, you have a chance to get hurt in practice. You got a bigger chance getting hurt if you got some 350-pound dude coming and smacking you in the mouth if you're Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields.
Well, and that's an even bigger thing, I would think, for like Lawrence and ATN. They were on a team that won a national championship. So, I mean, Not to say national championships aren't special, but you're talking about mortgaging your future for something you've done. You don't have anything you have to prove.
Yep. Yeah, that's what it's definitely going to be interesting. Like I hope before we get back into the Patriots thing here, I hope that they're able to find a way to do it because it's not even just that I want to see college football because I do for very selfish reasons. I just love college football, but it's this something you just said. I think if there is no college football season, like this is already with them going to conference schedules, is going to affect college football in a very big way. A lot of these lower tier schools, like the MAC schools that were making a big deal about, Big Ten plays a lot of MAC schools, and they get a ton of money. They get millions upon millions of dollars for playing those teams. They're losing out on that money. That money funds their entire athletic program. So you're going to see massive shifts in the college landscape, especially if there's no college football season. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it's like 6 schools altogether would like be able to financially support themselves if there was no college football season. Like that's how big college football is to a lot of these teams. So it would be a massive thing. And that all being said, if there's not a way for it to be done safe for the players, then I do think that you shouldn't do it because it's not fair to ask these kids to do it because they aren't getting paid. The NFL is different, MLB, NBA, because you have the ability to opt out. I don't think that you can necessarily do that in a college game because I could definitely see a college coach being like, well, your scholarship's not guaranteed next year either, man. So if you don't play, and that's where I think you could run into a lot of issues.
I thought though they said I thought the NCAA came out and said everyone's scholarship was going to be guaranteed this year, whether they played or not. But I guess you're talking about next year.
No, they did. The issue with that is that they've said that they won't lose eligibility and that they can keep their scholarships. The problem with that is, and this is kind of I addressed it I think with Stoops and Ricky when we talked about it back when this all first started coming about months ago. Is they've already promised certain scholarships to freshmen that haven't even gotten there yet. They're coming in this year. So if you keep the older players, like say me and you are seniors that were supposed to be leaving, if you keep us, well, that takes away scholarships from the guys that were supposed to be getting them, the freshmen, and you'll have another freshman class coming in the year after that. So it messes up unless they add scholarships onto programs, which I don't think the NCAA will do. You're going to cause all kinds of issues when it comes because you're only allotted a certain amount of scholarships. You're going to have players that want to transfer out. It's going to cause all kinds of issues. So I don't. And the one thing I hate about the way the NCAA did it as well is they didn't put any stipulations in either. It was like, oh well, whatever the school wants to do, the school can do. And it's the same thing we've talked about with this whole Corona thing. It's like we've had so many states just like the cities can do whatever that city wants to do. This city can do that, and it's fucked everything up. So. Let's talk about the Patriots now. We were talking about them, it seems like 20-ish minutes ago. We kind of got off on this whole thing. So over-unders, Cam Newton, QB 15 in 2020.
I'm going to say over. I mean, I think he can still have a good season, but I'm going to put him in the middle to low end QB2.
Yeah, so am I. I worry a little bit about his health, too. I know we just haven't seen him out on the field. And, again, weapons – I think 15 is probably right around where I would put him. Obviously, he kind of signed after we did our QB rankings. So if I had to go one, I'd go over. He has an ADP of 221. Again, that'll probably rise now. This is taken before he really did any signing or before he signed with the Patriots. QB 28, just before him, Dwayne Haskins, Tom Brady, and Teddy Bridgewater. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'm going to say no, because, see, the thing is, it's great that he signed, and I think he has an opportunity there, but he signed a 1-year incentive-laden deal. I don't know that we can feel any more secure about what he is beyond this season than we were before. And in the case of Brady, where he may not play another season, I still think he's better in 2020 than Newton. So that feels like the right spot for him.
I would take him over Brady because I do think at best Brady has 2 years left. I agree he's probably going to be better this year. The one thing I'll say is if Newton does come out and prove that he's healthy and has a good year, there's a couple teams, for instance, one with the guy that we'll mention, actually 2 guys on the I'd say all 3 guys on the tier right behind him that all could be losing their quarterbacks or moving on from their quarterbacks that might be willing to sign Newton, and all 3 have cap room. And so those would be Big Ben, Derek Carr, and Phillip Rivers. And so that's the one thing is like I already know we all know how much like Gruden's loved Newton when they've talked about all this stuff. Like if he has a good season, there's a couple teams that have cap room that I think would go out and sign him. Now, maybe the Patriots make the playoffs and a Super Bowl run and Newton wants to come back on a team-friendly deal. I think the Patriots is kind of almost out of the question because of how bad their cap space is. But there's a couple teams. Steelers they don't have any kind of real backup. I mean, I like Jacob Eason, but if you're telling me if you're the Indianapolis Colts who are in their Super Bowl window, in my opinion, if you're like, hey, you can have Cam Newton or Jacob Eason moving forward, I'm taking Cam Newton without even thinking about it. So, and I'm taking him over Brissett as well. So Newton is one guy that you're taking a gamble for sure. So if you want to take Brady, like you just said, there's nothing wrong with it. You know you got him for 2 years, and Newton has no secure future after this year. I would just take the gamble that if he stays healthy and has a good season, someone will take a gamble on him. And I like the talent. So I would take Newton over him. But that would be why I'd keep Haskins and Bridgewater over him, because I know they're at least secure for a couple more years with their futures. Behind him, Big Ben and Carl Rivers, as I mentioned. Would you take any of those three over Newton?
I would take Ben.
Okay. He would be the coin flip one for me. I have so many worries about his elbow, like I do Newton's injuries, that I'm kind of like, for me, it would just be however I guess I feel my team's going at that point would be where I'd lean, because
yeah, I mean, both those guys have injury concerns. Both, you could worry about the future. I lean toward I think Pittsburgh has possibly a better defense right now, and I like their offensive. Yeah, I like their offensive pieces a little bit better. If I knew Newton, was going to have 2 or 3 more years, that would, I might take him over all 6 of those guys. It's just the unknown.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of where it's like you're having, like I said, you're having to guess if he has this. Well, Las Vegas has all of this cap room. Maybe they'd make a move for him. So yeah, it's definitely a guessing game with Newton. James White, RB20, over or under?
I'm going to say slight over, because I think I had him like 24, 25.
I am going to go slight over as well. ADP of 127. He is the 43rd RB off the board. Just ahead of him, Lindsey, Antonio Gibson, and Marlon Mack. I would take him over Gibson and Mack, not Lindsey. What about you?
Same.
Just behind him, Howard, Pollard, and Breida. Howard's interesting for me, but I think because of the PPR upside of White, I'd probably keep him over those 3.
Yeah, I think I would too. It's interesting because you referenced Gibson. I don't know if you saw our friend Nick Whalen's post about Gibson. I did not realize how few carries he had as a running back. I have a lot of questions now. Because I think his post was basically 3 people on his own team had more carries than him last year. Why do we assume he's going to be a great running back? And I was like, I don't know. Why do we?
Yeah, he was used mostly as a wide receiver. That's why I remember. Well, we talked about that.
Yeah, and I had him. I think I was the one that ranked him as a wide receiver because that's what they said he was.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's Washington for you, I guess.
Well, wide receivers seem like such a need for them too. We digress. But.
Yeah. I agree with you. That's what I said. But hey, they listed him as a running back, so that's where we have to rank him. It doesn't matter what we think. That's what Washington decided to do. All right, so Sony Michel, RB25, over or under?
I'm going to go over. But, if he ended up under, it wouldn't be the world's biggest surprise.
I'm actually going to go under on him and the next guy because of I think if Michel stays healthy, I do think they're going to lean on him a lot, and I think he does have a little bit of a bounce-back season this year. So I'm going to go under. ADP of 98.5, RB 333 off the board. Just ahead of him, Kerryon, Mostert, and Vaughn. I take him over Kerryon. Mostert would be a coin flip for me. I would not take him over Vaughn. What about you?
Yeah, I probably take him over Kerryon, and that's it.
Okay. Just behind him, Ingram, Rojo, and Madison. To get in spirit for my buddy Dennis, since he's not here today, depending on my team is built, I would probably take Ingram if I'm competing this year. Outside of that, I would not take any of them over Michelle. I'd still keep Michelle.
I can't believe you're making me do this. I would take Ingram and Ronald Jones.
Ronald Jones. Hey, I
apparently, I do take Ronald Jones according to the analytics.
Yeah, the highest.
I'm pretty sure Sony Michelle was there when I took Jones at Scott Fishbowl. That was who I was deciding between.
He's still there in mine in round 12. I'm debating on taking him now. Harris. So I have Harris as RB30 with a caveat here, assuming that he ends up becoming the guy because of a Michelle injury or Michelle underperformance. So assuming Harris becomes the starting running back or splitting time with James White, do you think he has RB30 upside over or under?
Over.
I will go under, assuming that Michelle is not there. Obviously, if Michelle is good, Harris is not going to come anywhere close to this. But
I don't know why you're convinced that it won't be Rex Burkhead and James White.
I'm not sold on Rex Burkhead. I think, like I said,
no one's ever been sold on Rex Burkhead, and yet he's still there.
I just think he's going to have like one or two good games, and that's it. So ADP of a 164.47. He's the 56th RB off the board, just ahead of him. Latavius Murray, Chase Edmonds, and Boston Scott. Would you take him over any of those three?
No.
I'd take him over Edmonds and Scott. Murray, I'd probably hold on to because I know his value for sure with New Orleans, at least for this year. After Lynn Bowden, Rashad Penny, and Duke Johnson, you taking any of those three over Harris?
I kind of like Lynn Bowden, so I would probably take him. I think there's a chance he's a fun player for the Raiders, even though I don't care for the Raiders.
I know it's going to surprise some people. I'd take Duke. I'm actually starting to be kind of high on Duke.
Duke's not bad either. You know, Duke doesn't get enough love, so I probably would take Duke too.
Well, I mean, I hated that the Browns traded Duke. I love Duke Johnson. I
wanted him to go to a better spot than.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they traded him. Oh, they traded.
So here's the thing. Obviously, we've got a couple weeks before we get to the AFC South, but I think Duke's kind of a sleeper. He's going really late, and if DJ does not bounce back like some people think, Duke's all they have. And I know he's not a great inside runner, but he's still a really good receiver out of the backfield. He's the leading rusher at Miami, the U that had guys like Emmitt Smith. Here's
others. My bold prediction before we get to the Texans.
Go ahead.
A running back with the initials of D and J is going to lead the Texans in rushing.
Oh, bold take.
You heard it here first. You heard it here.
All right, so Julian Edelman, wide receiver 11 in 2020, over or under?
Over.
I am going to go under because he continues to do it, and I think he's got at least one more year. So I'm gonna give him a top 10 wide receiver again this year. ADP of 137.5. Again, we both agree that's going to start going up now that they signed Cam Newton. Wide receiver 61. Just before him, John Brown, Golden Tate, and Anthony Miller. Would you take him over any of those three?
Hold on a second. Are you sure he was top 10 last year?
Yeah, he was 7th.
Oh, yeah, he was. Oh.
Yeah. That's what I say. He always does it, and he never gets – and again, a lot of that, though, is because of Brady and how often he dumped off to him. But I think that we saw a lot of that out of Cam Newton in Carolina, and so I kind of think they're going to do the same thing here. I think he's still got at least one more year left in him. After this, I don't know.
I want to believe in Anthony Miller, but we haven't seen it yet, so I probably would not take any of them over Edelman.
Okay. Yeah, same. I would take Edelman over all three. Right behind him, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, and Sammy Watkins. Would you take any of those three over him?
No, and I can't believe Sammy Watkins is even being mentioned near Edelman's ADP. How the mighty have fallen.
Yeah, I am with you. I like Samuel, but I'd keep Edelman, more proven. N'Keal Harry, wide receiver 24 in 2020, over or under?
Over.
I am going to go slight over. I don't think it's going to be much past 24, but I think he's going to be right around that range. ADP of 88.17, wide receiver 43 off the board. Just ahead of him, Brandon Cooks, Darius Slayton, and Deontay Johnson. You taking him over any of those three?
No, and it's interesting. So the ADP you got for him, he must be falling in ADP instead of rising after Newton, because on Fantasy Pros now his ADP was 57.
Interesting. Well, so he was moving up then because ADP of 57?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wide receiver 57. Sorry,
Oh,
wide
well,
receiver.
he's wide receiver 43 on here, so he bumped up with Newton. Then they've got him
You,
as wide receiver 43.
no, but I just looked while we were on the air. I'm saying
Uh-huh.
he must be going the other way right now,
Oh, gotcha.
which is
Yeah,
interesting. I wonder if Sanu is going. I wonder if they're switching because of the Sanu hype.
maybe. I don't even think I pulled Sanu's because I don't think he's
No.
going to be relevant. So
But at that ADP, I would say Harry is less desirable to me.
okay.
Looking at all six of the people, because you're about to name them behind him, I wouldn't take him over any of the people ahead of him, and I wouldn't take him over any of these people behind him either.
Yeah, I'm with you. As I say, I wouldn't take him over. Again, I feel bad saying that because everybody knows I necessarily am not a big fan of him. So, but yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, so Devin Asiasi, he's the guy that everybody loved that they drafted. They seem to like him a lot. So tight end 15 in 2020, over or under?
Over. I just don't.
Agreed.
I don't have a good feel for that.
ADP of 230, tight end 33 off the board, just ahead of him, Olsen, Disley, and Everett. You taking him over those three?
No.
I might Olsen just because I know Olsen's only got 1 year left, and obviously they drafted. When did they draft Asiasi? I can't remember. Is it third round, fourth round? So I mean, obviously
he wasn't even their top drafted tight end. They took Dalton Keene first.
No, Keene went after him actually. I think maybe I'm wrong, but they both got drafted.
They were like within 2 picks of each other.
Yeah,
too,
they both got drafted in the third round. So, and that's my thing though, is that Bill drafted him in the third round, so he obviously wants him. He must have seen something from. I don't know much about Asiasi, but again, people I follow that I trust are really high on him, so I thought I'd throw him out here. After him, Rudolph, Albert O, and Uzoma. I would not take any of those three over him. As much as I love Albert O, he's in just a bad situation when it comes to getting targets, I think, in Denver. So
I don't think he's in as bad of a situation as you do. I would take Alberto.
All right, so the Buffalo Bills, 10-6 last year, obviously had that great game against the Houston Texans and ended up, after taking the lead, losing on that ridiculous play by Deshaun Watson where he looked like he had gotten sacked, spins out, throws the ball down the field, just ridiculous. So has Allen proven to you that he can be a franchise quarterback?
I think so. I wasn't incredibly high on him during that draft class. I was, actually spent a good deal of time hoping he wasn't going to go to Denver. And I think we saw he had some growing pains in his first year, missed some games, but, that completion percentage, as Dennis, if he was with us, would point out, Josh Allen is not very accurate, wasn't incredibly accurate in college. But to his credit, I think we saw him be a better quarterback in 2019. It was only his second year. He got his team into the playoffs. He seems to fit what they want to do. They're trying to build around him. They're trying to scheme around him. He's trying to take advantage of that. He is a rushing weapon, but we saw his completion percentage went from 52.8 as a rookie up to 58.8. He had over 1,000 more yards, 10 more touchdowns, and reduced his interceptions. Those are all things that you have to praise if you're looking at a guy who's a quarterback. It was his second year. It's not a high-volume passing offense. I think he's trending in the right way, and if you look at that kind of celebrated group of quarterbacks that came out, none of us are even rostering Josh Rosen. A lot of questions about Sam Darnold still. And here's Josh Allen just kind of plugging away, doing what needs to be done. We both think Baker's going to be better this year, but I think Allen has done well for Buffalo, and Buffalo's done well with him, and I think that's one of the reasons, to me, Buffalo is still a favorite going into in the AFC East going into this season.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Obviously, he took a step forward from what we saw in his rookie season. I didn't see anything. Obviously, he did kind of falter in the second half of that game against Houston. First playoff game. I'm sorry, not everybody's going to go in there and be Tom Brady or Steve Young, Joe Montana. It's just not. They're not every guy's going to go in there and beat Patrick Mahomes. So he looked good though all year. Had obviously a couple bad games in there. Went 10-6, but saw enough of a step forward from him last year that I don't see any reason to think he's going to take a huge step back. So I'm with you. I think he's obviously the accuracy deep is an issue, but he does enough everywhere else, and I think he can still be a viable franchise quarterback. So new additions, they traded for Stephon Diggs. They drafted Zach Moss in the 3rd round, Gabriel Davis in the 4th, Jake Fromm in the 5th, Isaiah Hodgins in the 6th. They lost Frank Gore, and their expiring contracts this year are Tyler Kroft, TJ Yeldon, Gabriel Davis, and Isaiah McKenzie. Fantasy finishes, Allen finishes QB6 with 297.56 points. Singletary, RB32 with 147.9. John Brown, wide receiver 20 with 219.8 points. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 24, 212.1. All of that obviously with Minnesota. Cole Beasley, wide receiver 34, 184.8 points. And then Dawson Knox, tight end 32 with 79.7 points. If you own Devin Singletary, how worried are you about Zach Moss? And if you want to factor in what Josh Allen does as well, Josh Allen in that running game.
Yeah, see, there's the thing. Before they took Zach Moss, it seemed like Singletary was going to be kind of a winner in that standpoint because he was going to get all the chance to run and to do that work. Now he's splitting carries, whatever limited opportunities he might have had to get looks at the goal line are probably completely removed because Josh Allen is still going to be their preferred goal line back guy. Scored with 9 rushing touchdowns last year, and now you have a bigger banger in Zach Moss. So it's kind of a bummer. If Singletary, you'd like to say, PPR will help him, but I think as we're about to talk about, they're not a high volume passing offense. They have 3 receivers. They have a tight end we're kind of interested in, and they have Singletary. There's no way from a purely passing standpoint that unless the Bills fundamentally change their approach, they can support all that.
Yeah, so I am obviously as well a little bit. We've kind of talked about it even before they drafted Zach Moss, like the fact that it seems like, as you mentioned, Allen is their preferred goal line back is going to hurt Singletary. You're almost having to hope that he scores on long runs, or if he's on like the 15 or 10, that he gets that carry and breaks a tackle or 2 and gets into the end zone. Otherwise, he's going to definitely see a reduction. It's almost like CMC a couple of years ago. We saw Cam Newton vulturing all those touchdowns from CMC after CMC was doing all that work to get down to the goal line, and then it was Cam Newton putting it in. So I still think Singletary is a very good running back, but I'm with you on that, and I agree on the PPR side of it too, because I think a lot of those short passes are going to go probably to Beasley with what we saw last year, or possibly not. So that kind of takes away from Singletary there as well. Can all 3 wide receivers be relevant in Buffalo? We saw last year that Brown and Beasley both were for the most part. Now they bring over a guy like Stephon Diggs, who's going to be the one. So how many, if you think, can all 3, or how many do you think can be fantasy relevant in 2020?
I mean, to a certain extent, I think all 3 can. I think we have some kind of high hopes that Diggs will be the number 1 there. I think Diggs and Brown may hurt each other more than Diggs and Beasley. I was really kind of taken with the, in the consistency guide, there's a lot of talk about what, Beasley being a good value. He's a guy I've been taking late, kind of seeing him in there. But I think if they can manage to keep all 3 of those guys relevant, it's at the expense of Knox, who we're going to talk about in a minute, and Singletary. There isn't enough volume going around. And I think as it is with those receivers, whereas Brown and Beasley were pretty consistent as the 2 guys last year, I think when you throw Diggs into the mix, there's going to be less consistency, probably for Brown, where you have peaks and valleys. Probably Brown and Diggs might both have decent seasons, but be not incredibly reliable week to week as starters.
Yeah, I think he's the one for me that I think is going to take a step back is Brown, because I think him and Stephon Diggs' games are just so similar. And as much as I hate to say, because I like Diggs, we kind of saw the way that he was in Minnesota last year when he wasn't getting the ball enough. Is he going to be like that over here in Buffalo? If that's the case and they try and force him the ball some, I can see Brown missing out on some targets. I don't think it affects Beasley as much. And you're also not expecting that much out of Beasley. He's a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and I think he's still going to produce that because of where he operates on the field. I think it affects Dawson Knox more, so we'll just move right into Dawson Knox. Is that because of getting Diggs and Brown and having Beasley, does that make Dawson Knox the odd man out?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I like Knox, and he's somebody I have rostered. But when you look, he was basically their starting tight end as a rookie last year, and still ended up, that TE32 range. He's a high end tight end 3, especially with more receivers in the mix and with a more talented running back in Singletary. I like Knox. He's going to have a few good games. I don't know that he's a reliable week to week starter. He's somebody I'm still keeping for depth. I actually have one team that will make you laugh, where I have Hawkinson, Fant, and Knox. It's kind of exciting, but also Knox is like my break glass for emergency starter right now.
Yeah, he was a guy that I was all in on too last year. I own him in a lot of leagues, and obviously I hope that he eventually. But I think kind of what we were just talking about, it's almost going to be a point where when Beasley moves on from the team, I think is when he might see that step up, because he made a lot of really good plays last year. It's just it's too limited because they run the ball as much as they do, and I think with that he's going to be the third or fourth option on every single play, and I just don't think Allen as a quarterback gets to that point either. I think once Allen kind of goes 1-2, maybe he gets to his third read, and if it's not there, he takes off. And so that almost all then eliminates Knox as well, and possibly getting some love here in the receiving game. And as I mentioned, had we not gone off on our college football tangent, this would have gone a lot quicker because we're already almost through the Buffalo Bills here. There's just really not much to talk about with them. Well, we know what their team is going to be. So over-unders. Allen, QB8 in 2020.
I think isn't QB8 where I had him.
Maybe. I don't know. He finished 6th last year, so.
Yeah, and I thought he'd be up in that. So I'll say slight over, say like QB 8 to 10 feels right to me.
Yeah, I'm going to go slight over as well because I think hoping as a Singletary truther, as my name says right there, that the touchdowns will come back a little bit and they'll go to Singletary. So that'll drop him a couple spots, but I don't think he falls out of the top 10. His ADP of 102.33, he is the 8th QB off the board. Just ahead of him, Wentz, Wilson, and Prescott. You taking him over any of those 3?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Wentz maybe, just because I love Allen's rushing upside, but I'd easily take Wilson and, God forgive me, Prescott over him for some reason.
Look, this is going to have to be painful for both of us. You had to admit you'd take Prescott. I had to talk about my love for Ronald Jones.
Hey, I guess so, because I love me some Ronald Jones, and you are a closet.
I know we've spent too much time together.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's rubbing off on me, and I don't like it. I don't like talking about the Cowboys.
Hey, at least you don't have the record in Scott Fishbowl for a highest love for Ronald Jones.
Well, if Rojo ends up panning out, you'll be throwing that in everybody's face, though. So you've got that going for you, at least. Just behind him, Baker, Burrow, and Tua. Would you take any of those 3 over Allen?
No, not over Allen. I do like Baker though.
I like all 3. I'm just going to be honest. I would take Baker.
Oh, you should.
Of who I am. What's up?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You should.
Oh yeah,
he's your boy.
I would take him, and as a matter of fact, I did in the Scott Fishbowl. Allen and Baker were both available, and I took Baker. I would, because it's Baker, and I'm a Browns fan. Burrow and Tua would be interesting because I love both of them. But I think Allen's proven it, and so I'd probably stick with Allen in the long run over those 2. Devin Singletary, RB22 in 2020, over-under.
Slight over. I believe I had him at 25.
I will go slight over as well. ADP of 58.5, RB23, just ahead of them, Montgomery, Gordon, and Gurley.
I'd go over Gordon and Gurley.
Man, that's so hard for me. Probably Gordon, because I think he splits. We've already talked about how much we both think he splits time with Lindsey. So Singletary, even though he's going to lose out on touchdowns, I think is the guy. Gurley would be the coin toss for me. It would be based on how my team is. If I need to win this year, I'm going Gurley, because as we talked about, I think this will be a week after. Gurley, we all think is just going to get the wheels run off him this year, so I think he's going to have a good 2020. But long term, I definitely want Singletary. Just behind him, Bell, Chris Carson, and James Conner. I would not take any of those three over him. Would you?
No, probably not. But I would like to say, even though Dennis couldn't join us today, I feel like we've represented him.
Yes, we've definitely represented him well today. Zach Moss, RB 35 in 2020, over or under?
I'm going to say over.
I will go slight over as well. ADP of 112.83. He's the 37th RB off the board. Just ahead of him, Madison, Rojo, and Ingram. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'm going to take him over Madison because I feel like he, at least we know, has a defined role. If Cook ends up signing long term, is Madison ever anything more than a handcuff?
Yeah. So that would be the only reason I would take Madison is if I owned Cook, just to make sure I have the handcuff. Outside of that, I am with you. I would not. I would take him over Madison. Just behind him, A.J. Dillon, Tariq Cohen, and Mack. Would you take any of those three over Moss?
I would take Cohen if I'm in PPR because, I think we've talked about he's a little underrated in that he seems to be getting 80 to 100 targets a year.
I would do Cohen and probably Dillon because I am very much sold on I don't think the Packers will pay Aaron Jones. I think Dillon is the future there, but I will admit you are taking a gamble if you do that because that's not guaranteed. But I kind of feel like you're taking a gamble on Mossy too. So I would.
Well, Dillon even this year could have a complementary role the same way we think Moss will.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, for me, I guess it would be just who you believe in more. Obviously, there's some people out there who really believe in Moss. They'd easily take Moss. For me, it'd be Dillon and Cohen. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 15 in 2020, over or under?
I'm going to go over.
I will go. Yeah, I'm going to go over as well, actually. ADP of 42.23, wide receiver 19, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, and Cortland Sutton just ahead of him. Are you taking him over any of those three?
I am not.
I agree with you there. Kupp would be close, but I think just based on that offense, I'd probably still go Kupp. Just behind him, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, and DJ Chark. Are you taking any of those three over Diggs?
I would take Lamb and Allen.
I think I'd take all three. Obviously, I love Allen. He's more proven than Diggs. Love me Lamb and Chark, too. I think I'd probably end up taking all three.
I mean, it's not a stretch to think that wide receiver 2 in Dallas is going to be a higher score than wide receiver 1 in Buffalo.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. John Brown, wide receiver 28 in 2020, over or under?
Over.
I will go over as well. ADP 137, wide receiver 60. Just ahead of him, Golden Tate, Anthony Miller, and Paris Campbell. Are you taking him over any of those three?
Depending on the construction of my team, where I was going, I might take him over Campbell because that's not a sure. But I think he and Tate may have similar roles on their teams, and sadly, I think Tate may be part of a better passing offense.
Yeah. I would take him over Miller and Campbell. I'm not sold on, I heard a lot of stuff today that really seems like they're believing Mitch is still going to be the starter, and so I think that's bad news for Miller. So I would still go Brown just because of what he's proven. And what we talked about earlier, but I agree with you on Tate. Like I agree. I think he is on the better pass offense with the Giants with what they've gotten Daniel Jones. So I would keep Tate ahead of him. Just behind him, Edelman and Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. Would you take any of those three over Brown?
100% taking Edelman over John Brown. I think that's a reflection of the hate went too far. The problem, I would say Robbie Anderson and Samuel have somewhat the same trouble that we have with Diggs, Brown, and Beasley in that it may not be the highest volume passing offense and how much do they cannibalize each other. So from that standpoint, Brown has been a more consistent wide receiver in his career, so I'm going to go with him because to me it's unclear. I think DJ Moore is definitely the top dude in Carolina, and beyond that, they signed Anderson for a reason, but they still have Samuel, and it's hard to tell who's going to end up where in the pecking order.
I don't know if I got that mosquito or not. I really hope I did. I would possibly, obviously, Edelman's an easy, as you just said. Samuel, maybe. I've been all in on Samuel. I think he's going to have a huge year this year. So I think he could be the future with Carolina there with DJ Moore. So I probably would go Samuel. Cole Beasley, wide receiver 35 in 2020, over or under?
I'm going to take the over.
I'm going to go slight under here. I think Beasley's going to take a little bit of a step up. Having Diggs and Brown on the outside, I think is going to help him a little bit in the middle of the field. ADP of 225.67, wide receiver 96 off the board. Just ahead of him, Marvin Sanu, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Russell Gage. Pac-12 just announced today we're only playing conference games as well. That just dropped. Anyways, you taking Beasley over any of those three?
Well, first I'll say I would imagine every one of the power conferences is going to follow suit because that's the only reasonable thing to expect. And I would take Beasley over all three of those guys because I think he's more proven, and I think you're talking about a collection of wide receiver 3-ish. I mean, MVS, talk about one game a year where you're like, man, I wish I would have started him, and then 15 games a year where you're like, why is this guy on my team?
I am with you. Just channeling my inner Dennis here, he would not take MVS over him, Nobi, or he would not take him over MVS because MVS has got to break out eventually, right? So I would take him over all three.
Break out in hives,
he believes it. He's been on that train. You got to give him credit for sticking on.
I know, and because of him, I have a couple of shares of MVS, and I imagine there's going to be 15 games this year where I'm Dennis.
Yeah,
you know, the old Newman.
Just after him, Justin Watson, Devin Funchess, and Traquan Smith. I would not take any of those three over Beasley. Would you?
No, and in fact, the Funchess one, there's the other guy. It's him, MVS, or Lazard. Take your pick in the saddest competition in the history of time.
Hey, a lot of people believe in Lazard. Yeah, he could be the next best thing.
I believe he exists.
I mean, he does exist. He's there. Dawson Knox, tied at 24, over or under?
Over.
Yeah, I have to go over too, and that saddens me as much as I love the kid. ADP of 202.17, tied in 28 off the board. Just ahead of him, Njoku, Ebron, and Cook. You taking him over any of those three?
I'm definitely taking him over Ebron. I'm not sold what his situation there is long-term or not, and I still think Knox has a decent prospect. Njoku's tough. Obviously he requested that trade. If he ended up in a better situation, that could be instant value that we don't think we're going to see with Knox. But if he stays where he's at, Knox is probably a better bet. So that one really is a coin flip about how where you think Njoku might go. At this point in time, I'm taking Knox.
I would take him over Ebron and Cook pretty easily. I think Cook's he probably has a good year this year. I don't think he's with New Orleans much more after this, so I would take him over them. Njoku, I'm a little bit different with you. I know me and Dennis are on the same boat here. I think if Njoku moves on, I agree with you. He's likely, if he goes to a team that needs a tight end, instant value. But even if he stays with Cleveland, I think he's got a lot of upside. I think Austin Hooper is the better blocking tight end, and they're going to use Hooper a lot for that, which is going to free up Njoku to do some things on the offense because they are going to run a lot of two tight end sets. So I'd keep Njoku over Knox. After him, Adam Troutman, Gerald Everett, and Will Dissly. You taking any of those three over Knox?
I mean, I'm tempted with Dissly, but we just don't know about his health, so I'd probably keep Knox where he's at. Troutman potentially has interesting future, but at this point in time, I think Knox has a defined role on a team, so I'm sticking with him.
I agree. So that'll do it for the first part of the AFC East breakdown here. You guys will see another episode on Thursday this week. I can't tell you what it's going to be because I'm not 100% sure yet. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we are pre-recording these, as I will technically, when this drops for the podcast audience, be on vacation. So we will let you guys know eventually when those drop, but I'm not sure what it's going to be exactly yet. So thank you guys so much for listening. Matt, thank you again for joining me today. Hope you have yourself a good week, and we will talk again soon.
Yep. Stay cool.